Hey guys, welcome back to my Animal Adventures YouTube channel. And if you're keeping snakes like I am, maybe on a large scale where you have hundreds of snakes, or maybe you just have a few reptiles as pets, there's a few things you should know. There are rules and regulations regarding certain species in certain states, and even within the state of Colorado here, there are certain rules and restrictions that are only in the suburbs of Denver, only in certain areas, and you really have to know the rules and regulations. And as a matter of fact, there are people and organizations that are trying their hardest to take your snakes away by force, and let me tell you, there's a way you can fight back, and I'm going to cover that in this episode. So when I first started getting into snakes, I decided I wanted to get into ball pythons as well as pick up a couple reticulated pythons. And as a matter of fact, right before I bought my retics a few years ago, I found out about the Lacey Act. And the Lacey Act actually prohibits transport of certain species across state lines. And right before I bought my retics, they actually added the reticulated python, the Burmese python, and the rock python to the Lacey Act. And it was pretty devastating for me. I couldn't get my snakes because I couldn't order them on the internet and have them shipped in. And I couldn't even imagine if you were a breeder, you know, each snake having 40 or 50 hatchlings. What are you going to do with all the hatchlings if you can't ship them out and sell them? I couldn't even imagine what that did to the reptile business, especially if you're breeding some of these big snakes. And as a matter of fact, a few years later, they actually lifted the ban on the reticulated pythons, and I was actually able to get a couple retics, which is really good. But it really opened my eyes to the rules and the regulations and what's really going on as far as the regulations behind the reptile business. So I've seen some proposed regulations that luckily haven't been passed. There was one in particular, actually I saw a YouTube video about it, and it was about they wanted to eliminate all pets non-native to your state, which means all these snakes, everything, these rats, your dog, your cat, your fish, everything, your birds, your pet birds, everything, they wanted to get rid of it, which is essentially shutting down all the pet stores. And can you imagine just the hard hit on the economy, shutting down all the pet stores, the pet industry? It's huge. You know, there's so many people that sell the feed and the caging and the supplies and work at the stores. There'd be a lot of people out of business, and let me tell you, it would really negatively affect the economy, and it's a good thing that that didn't pass. So I've also seen proposed regulations that luckily haven't passed as far as making it so difficult to try to keep and breed reptiles that you might as well not even do it at all. As a matter of fact, there are some countries where it's extremely difficult. If you look at the reptile shows in Australia, you can actually go to a reptile show and they'll have their displays with their animals, but you can't put a price on your animals, and you can't say that you want to sell them, which is really weird. You can sell them, but you just can't sell them at the shows, and you can't promote the selling of the reptiles. And if you look at some of the reptile shows in Australia, it's really interesting. And some of the other proposed regulations that I've seen were like, for every snake you have, you need a permit for every snake, and you have to pay a fee. And let me tell you, with all these snakes that I have so many I have so many snakes in here that just thinking having a permit for every single snake, it would be, you know, especially if you had to pay like a yearly fee per snake and you had to register them, it would be, you know, there's no way, I mean, they could regulate you out of the reptile business without actually, you know, forcing the snakes out of your hands. And that's another thing we really have to fight for, is the freedom to keep these animals. So if you keep large snakes like reticulated pythons or even boa constrictors, you really have to pay attention to the regulations versus ball pythons or smaller snakes. A lot of regulations are geared towards the big snakes. And as a matter of fact, here in Colorado, it says, especially if you go to the reptile shows and you're signing up, for me as a vendor selling, there's regulations that I can't sell to certain suburbs of Denver if I'm selling reticulated pythons, which is pretty amazing. So if you're wondering how to keep on top of these regulations, these new proposed rules as they come out, there's one website that's fighting for your rights. That's all they do for reptiles and amphibians. They're fighting for you to keep your animals, and that is a website called USARK. U-S-A-R-K. And I want to pull that up on my computer, and I want to show you real quick, just give you a quick tour of the website and show you what they're all about. Okay, so here's the website. It is usark.org, usark.org. And this is what it is. It's actually the United States Association of Reptile Keepers. And you can actually join USARK for a yearly fee. You can also donate. And basically all they do is protect your rights and they make you aware of what's going on. And here is kind of the most recent stuff. They list the reptile super shows and all the stuff that's really going on in the reptile community. And for a really good example, let me just scroll down a little bit. And it actually has right here on 10/2/18, they have import moratorium of certain species and online survey in Florida. So if you click here on the link, it'll bring you over to this page. And this is an executive order and online survey. And this is what it says. An executive order has been issued today which will prohibit the importation into Florida the species listed below. If you read on a little bit, the following species are considered to be a risk to the ecology or human health and the safety of Florida. And then it lists all the species that you can't bring into Florida. And here they have a few snakes. The yellow anaconda, which is unfortunate. I really like the yellow anacondas. And they have another one, another type of anaconda, the shunsies. I never heard of that. And then the brown tree snake. And if you scroll down a little bit more, it says no person shall import into the state the above species listed except facilities that meet the permit requirements for the possession of prohibited species. So you really have to be aware of the regulations and what's going on. And USARK tells you everything, step by step, blow by blow, everything that's going on in the reptile community. So the other thing you have to really consider is if you have reticulated pythons, especially if you're thinking about moving to a state where they're banned or you need a special permit, such as Florida, you typically can't bring your snakes with you. And for me, having reticulated pythons, especially if I get into a big breeding project with retics, I'm definitely not going to be able to move to Florida or some of those states that actually ban reticulated pythons. As a matter of fact, someone left a comment on one of my videos and said his specific location in New York, he can't have reticulated pythons in that city, which I thought was kind of interesting. A specific location within New York City, it's only that specific location instead of the whole state, which doesn't really make sense to me because, you know, if you let I can see it in Florida, if you release your reticulated python, it can actually be a problem, that snake going into the wild. But the northern states, you really can't, the retics can't really survive the cold winters of a northern state. So I wouldn't really think it would be an issue if your reticulated python was released into the wild. So personally for me, actually keeping snakes and keeping animals is a lot more than a hobby and a lot more than a business. And to me, it really preserves the species and it continues the propagation of certain animals. And I know there's certain animals that absolutely would not survive in the wild. As a matter of fact, the crested gecko at one point was almost extinct, and we brought it back from the brink of extinction by bringing it into the pet trade and actually breeding it in people's basements just like this. So I actually feel like, you know, keeping and breeding these animals is actually preserving some of these species for future generations. So speaking of reticulated pythons and all the regulations against them, I really want to show you my two reticulated pythons. They're absolutely gorgeous animals. I'm actually breeding them, and if I can actually get some eggs and some hatchlings, hopefully I'll be able to ship them out before they change the laws again. And let me show you those two snakes. Alright, so take a look at this girl. This is Lucy. She is my reticulated python, and just to give you an idea how big she is, she's a really big girl. She probably weighs between 50 and 60 pounds. She is a white albino 50% Jampea dwarf reticulated python. I've had her since she was just a little baby. She was probably about as big as her tail right here when I got her. She's really tiny. She's grown like a rocket. I'm hoping she'll actually breed this year. And over in the corner over there, that's her mate. That is Sunny, and he is a purple albino. He's got a little bit of purple in the albino, and actually that's 2 copies of the genes, so the babies will be lavender albino, kind of a halfway in between, and he's part super dwarf and part dwarf, so it'll definitely reduce the size of the babies. They won't be quite as big as Lucy. And I'd say Sunny, he's probably about 25 pounds. And these guys are so neat to watch. They're just really beautiful, majestic snakes. I could just watch them all day long. Just the way they move around and they interact. And they're really gentle, docile animals. It's pretty amazing. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up the discussion, and if you didn't know it, there's people that want to take your snakes away, and let me tell you, the way to fight is to get on the internet, go to USARC, to donate, to look at some of the rules and regulations, to really get involved in trying to shut some of these people down and fight for your rights to keep reptiles. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.